neither of my parents had any particular interest in animals, and I think I got my earliest exposure to marine mammals still in the carriage. Is I think my mom, to get out of the house, would walk me down to Prospect Park Zoo, where the sea lions would be the noisiest of the animals there. So I started off, I think, developing an interest in animals probably at that earliest stage. Later on, is in early elementary school, I had a very good friend. He was from Denmark. His name was Niels Jacobsen, who was one of these kids who came in every day to school with a snake and a turtle or a frog that he caught. And he also had aquariums and whatever. We became good friends, and he sort of introduced me to going out in the woods and collecting animals, and also got me started with my aquariums and setting up tropical fish. My earliest interests from being a little kid was actually in reptiles and fish. As time went on, I took a number of alterations en route to studying animals, and so ended up skipping quite a few years later to my first career was actually in special education. So I worked with behaviorally problem kids. The vocabulary changes all the time. They're called emotionally disturbed kids, but also kids with learning disabilities. And then it was around this time is that I was living in Miami, and a couple of things happened. I took one of those nighttime adult courses from a guy named Hank Truby, who was on dolphins. Hank Truby was a linguist who worked with John Lilly. So a couple of his early publications, or John Lilly's publications on dolphin communication, were with Hank Truby. Hank Truby had also been a professional tennis player, I guess, as a young man. So I took tennis lessons from him, and we talked dolphins in between. That was actually the first time that I'd ever gone swimming with dolphins. He and Lily had a couple of dolphins out at a place called Mashta Island. It was off Key Biscayne. I still remember it distinctly. There were two young male dolphins, and as I'm in the water, I sort of yelled up to Hank. I said, "These dolphins keep hooking me with their fin." And he said, "That's not their fin that they're hooking you with." We got a student in named Debbie Colbert, and Debbie had worked over at Moat. She'd been a volunteer, but had recently been appointed as the manatee care coordinator.
At Moat Marine Lab?
Yeah, at Moat Marine Lab. And she had a problem that she thought that I could help with, and she wanted to address, and it was this, is that to give a manatee a physical, is you have to dry dock the animal, and you get about a dozen people to hold the manatee down. And then the veterinarian could do things like draw blood and, if possible, get an opportunistic urine sample, do whatever other basic procedures are involved. But this was clearly a stressful way of going about doing physicals for the animals and for the people. And people got hurt doing this. So she was wondering if we couldn't train the manatees for a lot of these procedures. And I said, sure we can. I said, why don't we make it a class project? So one of the nice things about New College is it does have a great deal of flexibility. And although I can't remember, this class was either an animal learning class or a sensation and perception class, one or the other. And I was able to sort of redirect it so that I had a lot of students who were able to help out on this project. And so the very first set of behaviors that we trained were blood draws on manatees, urine samples. So what the animal had to do was urinate on command. Um, and we also trained the manatees for core temperature, taking core temperatures, for ultrasounds, so which was basically the animal just had to stay still at various times for the probe to be put on them. We trained them for basic morphometric measurements. And so that they would. So basically, what we did was we would signal to them. They would come over to the side, depending on what the procedure was. We asked them to turn over on their backs, where they could stay, like dorsal up. And so that we had a full set of procedures, which were later turned out to be quite useful for veterinary purposes, basic husbandry. It also turned out to be useful for research purposes, so that Charlie Muneer was able to do a study looking at creatinine levels associated with the various behaviors that were involved in releasing animals. Okay, so let me describe that a little better. When manatees are released, is they frequently show a rise in creatinine levels.
What does that signal? What does that indicate?
It's usually not a good thing. So what we're looking at there is a protein breakdown, and so this would be a potential warning signal that something
stressful.
Yeah. And so what Charlie wanted to do was to, under controlled conditions, sort of isolate the type of experiences the manatee has when it's released. So we manipulated taking the manatees out of water for some period of time. We manipulated going from fresh water to salt water. We manipulated diet, going from laboratory foods, lettuce and kale, to more natural foods, seagrasses and freshwater plants. We manipulated fasting. A lot of times after manatees are released, they don't eat. So he did. So what he did was we were able to do this. We were able to actually do the study because of the training that we had done, which allowed Charlie to take blood draws and get urine samples multiple times per week.
And these are on the same two animals at Moat that the other studies have been done.
This is Hugh and Buffalo. I forgot to mention. Forgot to mention them. So this was actually an unexpected benefit of the studies.
So I'm gathering from hearing you talk, Gordon, that that's one of your themes, is that all these detours and unexpected things happen along the way, and part of the knack that you've developed is to recognize opportunities when they come your way and sort of run with it. Is that part of your story?
I would say it's part of the story. Part of that is also being prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. So I think you want to, from an education standpoint, is to be broadly educated with you need a firm foundation in methods. Frequently not the most exciting area for lots of students, but I think very important. And in behavioral research, there's actually a substantial overlap in the methods that are used in working with exceptional children, mentally retarded children, behaviorally problem children, running experiments with adults in the combat-related stress disorder experiments, and also in the animal studies.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So there are these areas of skills that have good transfer.
What do you say to people that ask you, since you've had experience working with dolphins and humpback whales and manatees, these are all marine mammals, obviously. What do you say to people that ask your opinion about, is it easier to train a manatee than a dolphin? Are they smarter? Are they dumber? How do you think about those kinds of questions?
Is I think people are asking a very difficult question. Is comparative intelligence is something that I think most researchers probably steer clear of. It's There were some sort of simple ideas, I think, quite some time ago. I mean, I think some people have at different times have suggested, well, if you have a big brain, it's a better brain, and if you have and then maybe they'll even get down into specific structures, like if this structure is larger, that will be a better brain. But brains, as you know a lot better than I do, are complicated things. I think size issues are just sort of lead you in, can lead you in the wrong directions. Mm-hmm. When I look at the behavior of manatees and dolphins, I suspect, we haven't actually looked at this formally, but if you measured learning in terms of the number of trials that an animal ran, sort of the number of times an animal got to do a specific task, and compared a dolphin and a bottlenose dolphin and a manatee, I suspect you wouldn't find much difference. I think manatees move slower, so it may take a little longer, but I think they learn just as fast. They also, at least the manatees that we work with, we can run 60, 70, 80 trials in a session, so that they can, and that's a training issue. We can do that with dolphins. As you build them up slowly, you don't start off with that many trials. And so it'd be very hard for me to say that a dolphin was smarter than a manatee. The things I've done have had this sort of service component to it. I seem to be attracted in some ways to that kind of area. Certainly in working with manatees and other marine mammals, is the behavioral research and other types of research are almost, they're integrally bound to conservation issues. Is when you have an endangered species, such as the manatee, is we want to know as much about the biology of those animals as possible. A lot of times without a specific goal kind of at the end of it, just that like the more you know about these animals, the better position you are to make good conservation recommendations. There are at times rather specific questions that directly feed into conservation. The question of why do manatees get hit by boats? The question there is like what stimuli do manatees, or what stimuli are manatees responsive to, and what stimuli do they fail to detect, and why? Are there sensory limitations? Are there behavioral limitations? So in terms of looking at values, I think is being able to address some of those specific issues that's important to me. But also just that very broad understanding. You know what? Like I could even say it actually a better and a more comprehensive way. One of the things that really interests me about animals, lots of people, lots of people I know kind of are surprised and they don't quite understand this, but I really want to know about animals, like what their view of the world is.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not in a Disney-esque way. I mean, not like a Disney cartoon. I mean, I'm not looking for an anthropomorphic, explanation of their behavior, but some idea of what is the world like from that animal's perspective. and certainly a very, steps in that direction include understanding senses, animal perceptions, and at a more advanced stage is cognition, how they organize the world, how they represent the world. And I think in terms of what motivates me through a variety of studies of marine mammals, I should say, if you like work with not only with marine mammals, but with turtles, honeybees, hamsters, whatever. Part of that is this question of what's their world like. And for anybody, not to necessarily to specifically target marine mammals, because the opportunities, if you're looking to do this professionally, are not very extensive. I think what you want to do is you want to get a broad educational foundation so you can go in a number of different directions. Leave yourself that foundation to take advantage of opportunities when they arise, but don't count on there being a huge number of jobs out there in marine mammal science. So, getting back to how do you prepare? There are a couple of fields that study animal behavior. Psychologists study animal behavior. Biologists study animal behavior. Although in recent years, lots and lots of biology has moved away from whole animal studies, and concentrations are more at molecular levels and cell levels, and whatever is the sort of the golden years of ethology, I think, have passed. Maybe they'll come back. So, what I think probably in looking at education is if you're going to be a biologist, or if you're going to be a psychologist who's working with like animals, I think you need to think about getting a good solid natural science foundation. Is you'll want to know not only how you go about studying their overall behavior under natural conditions, so out in the field, but also in the laboratory. A different set of skills are involved. But also you'll probably want, as part of an explanation of behavior, you want to know how their sensory systems work, how their cognitive systems work. In other words, you're looking at the nervous system, you're looking at brains, you're looking at endocrines. So I think you need that kind of broad foundation. Now, as you're getting that, I mean, let's suppose you decide is that you want your emphasis to be on psychophysics, a study of the relationship between physical stimuli and perception. Maybe you won't go into as much depth in, say, chemistry, as you might if you're studying the nervous system. If, on the other hand, is what you're interested in is the physiology of these animals, and you just need that solid natural science background. It's fairly standard, no matter
That's right.
no matter what area you're going in. And some people aren't interested in. What attracted me to marine mammals was this whole idea of, and animals in general, was this whole idea of their view of the world. I was interested in their behavior, but there are other people who are interested in completely different types of biological problems with these animals. I mean, everything from how do they avoid the bends? How do they withstand the physical forces of pressure at depth? How do you protect your eyes? Is with that the kind of pressures these animals encounter. So you have to ask yourself what are the problems that you're interested in studying. Oddly enough, I think one of the things that attracted a lot of people to studying dolphins who were my age was John Lilly. And now the problem with John Lilly obviously turned out to be is that despite the fact that he had substantial skills as a scientist, is engaged in some sort of questionable practices that led you to doubt some of his claims later on. But on the other hand, I think he attracted a large number of people to the field.
Yeah. So you're at an institution that strongly encourages undergraduate students to engage in research projects, and you described that wonderful thing you put together, the program you put together of having the students involved in developing the ability of training the manatees for husbandry skills. Is that something that you think is more or less essential for someone that's wanting to test the waters about whether this is a career, is to try to get involved in research as an undergraduate?
Yeah, I definitely is. I mean, if you're undecided, and most undergraduates are undecided, they change majors all the time. Is one of the things that, to give you some ideas, I started college as an English major, switched to pre-med, and then ended up with a degree in psychology, and then went back to school in music. But one of the things was as part of my interest in biology, I really was really excited. One of the courses I was really excited about taking was comparative anatomy, and one of the things that decided encouraged a change of direction was comparative anatomy. Is back in the days when I was working, they didn't have good gloves to work with. Is the rubber gloves that were available at that time were like thick rubber gloves,
like dishwashing gloves.
Yeah, like exactly. They're like dishwashing gloves. So you'd be working with these animals that were preserved in formaldehyde, formalin, whatever, and I wouldn't use the gloves. I mean, just because I didn't have any sense of touch. The only trouble is by not using the gloves, I didn't have any sense of touch anyway, because my fingers went numb.
And you smelled bad.
It smelled bad. It gave me all sorts of sinus trouble. I constantly, although I would go into the lab to work on weekends because I was just really excited about it, and then come out feeling physically miserable So that was one of the things that changed my the direction. But unless you actually try these things out, and some people get around these animals, and there are things about working with animals is that may not appeal to you. A lot of times they smell bad. I mean, it's just and some people don't like that. That's a problem for them. Some people what would be exciting, things that I would think were just really exciting to do is other people would just be totally indifferent to. The people I've got to encounter, people who become friends, and people who I just see every couple of years at conferences, just met a wonderful group of people. I don't know whether it's a particular field that attracts these people, or whether it's just being around people with some common interests. But that's one of the things that's really kind of kept me going at times. Is there's sort of the nature of jobs. They call jobs like jobs because they aren't play. I mean, there's work involved and whatever. And one of the things that keeps you sort of coming to the office is enjoyable people. I mean, they're enjoyable. They're exciting problems to study and whatever. But the people are very important. I would say one of the things to think about, kind of unexpectedly, is in terms of sort of career arcs, is that when you start off studying animal behavior, so with me, whether it was studying humpback whales or studying dolphins, you spend lots of time with the animals. Later on, I spent less and less time with the animals, and more time either teaching students who are working with the animals or dealing with data. Is my major contact with humpback whales for the last, maybe 20 years has been data.
Well, that does bring up the point that, one of the things all of us have to learn about science is that if you think the fun part is collecting the data in the field, then you're going to spend way more time than that analyzing the data and writing up the results at the office, basically. Yeah, and that's something that's sometimes difficult to learn.
Well, in terms of sort of thinking about what direction you want to go in a career, if you want to maintain that, if your interest is, I just want to work with the animals, I just want to be around them on a daily basis, well, things like being a trainer might be an appropriate career. If you're interested in actually engaging in the science, designing studies and analyzing the data and writing them up, then you want to go in a